Welcome to this presentation from Feeding the Horse. Today's topic is the equine hoof and the key nutrients our horses need for a strong, robust hoof. Okay, let's get started. We all know the adage, no hoof, no horse, and you've all probably had the frustration of not being able to ride because your horse is lame with a hoof issue like an abscess. But we can really help avoid these situations by giving the horse the nutrients its body needs to build a really strong, robust hoof. Just like our own fingernails, the hoof is continually growing. A healthy adult horse will grow 6 to 9 millimeters of new hoof each month, and a new hoof capsule every 9 to 12 months. So if you're not seeing very much growth between trims or shoeings, then that should raise a flag straight away. So slow hoof growth is one issue caused by dietary deficiency. The second is the quality of the hoof horn. If key nutrients are lacking, then hoof quality suffers, and then you get issues like thin walls, thin soles, flaking, cracking and chipping. These can cause discomfort for the horse, and weaknesses in the hoof wall are ideal sites for fungus and bacteria to take hold, and then you're going to get issues with seedy toe and abscessing, and potentially a really sore horse that could take quite a while to get right. So what we're going to be covering today are the main 4 nutrient groups that your horse needs to build a really strong, healthy hoof. Proteins, vitamins, minerals, and essential fatty acids. So first of all, protein. When we think of protein, we tend to think of muscle and how we need strong, healthy muscles to move us around. But many different structures in the body are made up from proteins, from our eyelashes to our toenails. After water, protein is the most abundant substance in the body. The hoof wall is over 90% protein, so any deficiency is going to show up pretty quickly. The different protein structures in the body are made up of chains of amino acids. Different patterns of these amino acid chains give you different protein structures. The hoof is made from the protein keratin. Slightly different forms of keratin also make our fingernails, hair, and the horse's coat. So you can see why poor hoof quality goes hand in hand with a pretty drab coat and a really slow growing mane and tail. The building blocks of proteins are amino acids. There are 20 of these, and they can be further divided into non-essential and essential amino acids. Non-essential can actually be synthesized by the horse, but the essential amino acids have got to be provided through diet. The really important essential amino acids in relation to the hoof are methionine and lysine. Methionine is one of the 3 amino acid building blocks needed to make keratin. Meanwhile, lysine is needed for hoof structure and is quite commonly deficient in equine diets. Okay, so we have different protein structures in the body that are made up of chains of amino acids. These amino acids can be synthesized within the horse's body, or they have to come through the diet. Now, what I'm going to want to explain now is how these dietary essential amino acids can act as limiting amino acids. So imagine you're a horse and you want to make some keratin today. We're going to need 3 amino acids for that. Alanine, that's our red beads, glycine, our blue beads, and methionine, our yellow beads. Now, the red and blue beads are non-essential amino acids, and we can synthesize those. We've got 7 red and 6 blue that you've made within your system. But the yellow beads, methionine, has to come through your diet. And as you can see, you haven't got much of that. So today, you can only make 3 strands of your red, blue, and yellow protein chain because you only have 3 yellow beads. Yellow is a limiting amino acid. It doesn't matter how many red and blue beads the horse has in its system. You can only make as many red, blue, yellow bead chains as you have yellow beads. So in effect, what this means is that you could have a horse whose overall protein intake looks good on paper, but he is still actually protein deficient because he is not getting the right types of essential amino acids to make full use of his available crude protein. So all this leftover protein that he can't use just gets broken down and weed out. In many ways, it's a bit like an obese person who is classed as being malnourished. Even though they are getting a gazillion calories from fats and carbohydrates and sugar, they are not getting sufficient nourishment because the vitamins and minerals are missing. And this brings us nicely onto our next subject, vitamins. So we've seen now how we need to provide the right types of amino acids through the diet. It's pretty cool that the horse's system can synthesize the non-essential amino acids, but it needs other nutrients to be able to do that, and that brings us to B vitamins. B vitamins are important to every organ and cell in the body, and they are all involved in the metabolism of protein. B vitamins are water soluble, so they float freely through the fluids of the body and are taken up by the cells where and when they are needed. They aren't stored in the body anywhere and are eliminated in urine, so they need to be taken into the diet on a daily basis. The B vitamins tend to complement each other, but there are 4 in particular that are important to the hoof. Biotin. This is probably the best well known, as there have been a number of studies that have demonstrated an improvement in hoof growth and quality with biotin supplementation. Niacin. This is needed in the body for protein metabolism, which is pretty important for hoof growth, as the hoof wall is over 90% protein. Pyridoxine. Again, needed for the metabolism of protein, and it is used in the body to synthesize the non-essential amino acids alanine and glycine, which are 2 of the building blocks of keratin. So again, you can see how easily deficiency can affect hoof health. Your horse might be getting plenty of crude protein, but if it is not getting sufficient B vitamins, such as B6, it can't break all of it down and synthesize it into the substances it actually needs. And finally, thiamine. Again, needed for protein metabolism, and like biotin, it also contains sulfur, and that brings us on to our next group of nutrients. So our next group is minerals. There are 4 that we're going to be looking at: sulfur, selenium, copper, and zinc. And again, if any of these are deficient in the horse's diet, then hoof quality is going to suffer. Now this guy has a pretty stinky job mining inorganic sulfur. But what a horse actually needs is organic sulfur that's found in the amino acids in plant proteins. Keratin, which largely makes up hoof tissue, is rich in sulfur. And that also explains why when you burn hair, which is a type of keratin, you get that horrid bad egg smell. That's the sulfur in the keratin you can smell. Sulfur is also needed to make collagen, and collagen is the base of all connective tissue in the body, including hooves, bones, joint cartilage, tendons, and ligaments. It's sulfur that forms the reinforcing bonds between the strands of collagen. Secondly, selenium. Several areas of the country suffer from selenium deficiency in the soil, and this can impact hoof health. But the horse only needs it in minuscule amounts. The maintenance requirements for a 500 kilogram horse are only 1 milligram a day. Within the hoof, selenium is used in an antioxidant enzyme that helps protect fats. So just to explain why this is important. The outer layer of the hoof wall contains a variety of fats and waxes that form a protective layer, sealing moisture into the deeper hoof structures and keeping the water out. A healthy hoof will have a natural slick feel and a shine to it. It's the selenium that helps protect this layer of the hoof. But with selenium, it is very important to remember that while a tiny little bit might be good, a lot is definitely not better. Excess selenium can kill a horse, and excessive selenium has a really detrimental effect on the hoof, weakening the protein structures. One of the characteristics of selenium toxicity is foot pain and the cracking of the hoof around the coronary band, which can progress to the sloughing off of the entire hoof capsule. If you think your horse may be selenium deficient, then we would recommend getting a blood test done by a vet, and then you can use that information as a basis for supplementation decisions. Thirdly, we have copper, and copper is needed for 2 enzymes within the hoof. And again, this is just another example that shows how these different elements interact with one another. Copper is needed to activate an enzyme which forms the sulfur crosslinks or bridges that hold the keratin strands together. Copper is also needed for another important antioxidant enzyme, superoxide dismutase. This enzyme is present in hoof tissue and helps prevent the fats and oils in hoof tissue from oxidizing. Oxidative damage to the fats can break the outer protective seal of the hoof, causing overdrying and cracking. Finally, there's zinc, which is present in high concentrations in healthy hoof tissue. So it's not surprising that signs of zinc deficiency in the diet show up in the hoof, with slow growth, thin walls, weak connections, and weak horn. Along with copper, zinc is needed in the antioxidant enzyme superoxide dismutase that helps protect the fats within the hoof tissue. A really interesting study out of Japan demonstrated a direct link between copper and zinc deficiency and the prevalence of seedy toe, which is a pretty common problem over here. At a large riding school, 100 horses were studied over 5 years. Groups A and B were the jumping and dressage horses, and Group C were the school horses. Groups A and B were generally looked after better than the Group C school horses. They were fed hay, loosened cubes, and barley. These horses received timely shoeing, clean bedding, and adequate hoof cleaning. but the incidence of seedy toe in these horses was much higher than the school horses. The poor school horses didn't have such a cushy gig. They went longer between shoeing, received inadequate hoof cleaning, and had dirtier bedding. These living conditions often caused chipped hoof walls and thrush, but very little seedy toe. The crucial difference was in their diet. Instead of being fed barley like the two performance groups, the school horses were fed a pelleted feed to control excitability. The school horses were actually getting twice the amount of copper and zinc in their diet compared to the performance horses. Once the performance horses were supplemented with copper and zinc, the incidence of seedy toe decreased significantly. So I think the results from this study are something really interesting to think about if you've ever had a horse with seedy toe. The final element to feeding the horse is making sure your horse is getting the right types of fats. These are the good fats, the omega-3s that we should all be getting more of, rather than the fun fats like macas and ice cream. If you don't feed your horse the right types of fats, you don't get the health benefits, you just get fat. Within the hoof, omega-3s help create the protective barrier which keeps water out and prevents the hoof tissue from drying out. Fresh pasture is a great source of omega-3, but omega-3s aren't very stable when exposed to the air, so it's pretty much destroyed in haymaking and storage. And the processes that most commercial vegetable oils go through to make them stable and give them a long shelf life alters the omega-3 fatty acids, so the body can't use them. Similarly, the fats that are added to commercial feed mixes are there as a cheap way of bulking up the overall energy amount and not as a useful source of omega-3s. So fresh pasture is a great source, but if it's not available or your horse cannot have much of it because it's prone to laminitis, then an alternative is freshly ground flaxseed. Again, this needs to be done daily given fresh because the oils from the seeds will start to go rancid if it's left exposed to the air. However, now it's also possible to buy commercial stabilised powdered forms of omega-3 that don't have this storage problem. So now that we've looked at some of the key nutritional elements that your horse needs for a really strong, healthy hoof, let's go through a case study to demonstrate what a difference receiving adequate amounts of key nutrients can make. And we'll start with this guy, Harry. At the time this study was taken, Harry was in full work, in good overall health for an 18-year-old, well-muscled and with plenty of energy for his work. He was on pasture, hay, chaff and 2 big hard feeds of a commercial feed, which was fortified with a broad range of vitamins and minerals. Despite this, however, his hooves were still not in the best condition. So he began supplementation with 3 amino acids, methionine, threonine and lysine, 3 minerals, zinc, copper and sulfur, and 4 B vitamins, biotin, pyridoxine, niacin and thiamine. So this is what Harry's hoof looked like after about 2 months of additional supplementation. And you can clearly see a difference in the quality of the new hoof growth that's beginning to come down. And here's a close-up of the hoof at 2 months. The new supplemented hoof is really tightly connected and smooth, whereas the older hoof is much coarser and drier with a lot of micro cracks in it. So this is what Harry's hoof was looking like after about 4 months. So now we've got about 2/3 of a new hoof capsule that's nice and shiny and smooth and tightly connected, and it's clearly very different from the older hoof tissue below. And finally, this is after 9 months of supplementation. And you can really see in the photo the natural gloss and shine that a healthy hoof should have. That's that protective layer that keeps water out and stops the hoof tissue from drying out. People often ask me what they should be putting on their horse's hooves to improve them, and I think that's a bit of a band-aid approach. You're slapping something on hoping that's going to solve a problem that's more than likely linked to diet. I think you're much better to think about what you're putting in your horse to improve their health. And what I learnt with Harry is that even if you think your horse is on a really good diet, he can still be deficient in the elements that he needs to build a really strong, healthy, shiny hoof. Feeding the hoof is quite complex and requires appropriate and balanced amounts of amino acids, vitamins, minerals and fatty acids. Deficiencies in these nutrient groups will show in the quality of hoof growth, and because of the way they interact with one another, it's quite probable that you will need to supplement more than one nutrient to get a really healthy hoof. If you want to improve your horse's hoof health, then get started straight away. because it will take 9 to 12 months to completely replace the hoof capsule that you've got at the moment. I hope you've enjoyed this presentation from Feeding the Horse, and we'll speak to you again very soon.